G'day, welcome back. This is a follow-up video to my earlier summary of the Curacao candidates, where we looked at the various blunders in some of the games and sort of endgame inaccuracies. And I left this game, basically the last game of the tournament, certainly the last round, Benko, for a little follow-up short video, because first of all, it's a little bit too involved in terms of the tactic that we were looking at. Wouldn't call it a blunder at all. And I didn't understand it, and I just investigated it. I found one of those sort of cases, which is what I'm calling edge cases, right? One move wins, one move draws. In this case, you look at the thumbnail there, one move draws, one move loses. And you look at the position and you think, why? I mean, it looks like black's got a bit of an advantage, and maybe white's only saving grace is like perpetual check, but white does have a pawn which can quickly get h7, h8 after the queen's moved out of the way. So there's a few things going on here. And I said, when I looked at this, I said, okay, what's going on? So I'm doing this short video. It may not be to everybody's taste, but at least you can see it's specifically that. And I've done a lot of previous videos on queen versus pawn end games and a queen and queen with an extra pawn. So this sort of fits into that sort of a bit more complicated. Some of the themes basically is how do you avoid perpetual check. Now, if we go to the capture screen, what we're going to do here is first of all, this is in the chessgames.com. Obviously, they have most games are there, and it's got this one. And I just say there's a bit of a kerfuffle about this because by losing, Benko actually lost the game on time, even though in some ways you think he had an advantageous position. And that helped Geller catch up to Keres. So there's seemed to be a lot of bad blood came about that. And there's some not really analysis, but some people assessing the position. So they're like, okay, well that's something you might have a look at if you're so motivated. Now, this is the position we're looking at, and if you look at the rolling score there, you can see the question we've got is that, first of all, you can look at this game at several positions actually. A little bit earlier, it was even most of the game. Geller blundered towards the approach of time control, and then Benko was winning comfortably. And you can see this swivel around about move 50, where first of all, black blundered, position became a draw, and then white blundered, position became a win again, and black was winning but lost on time in the end. So that's sort of one thing to bear in mind. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at this position in particular. We can actually just sort of go back a few moves. This is where the position's winning, and actually I'll just show it because it sort of helps to understand one thing. A3 is wrong. That just loses the H pawn in the wrong way. And what should have been played was queen to b1 check. We'll just go through a few moves here. Check. Basically, you get your queen in a nice central position. Then you push your g-pawn, and the whole point of that was holding your h-pawn. And then you can see that black's got two very dangerous pawns, and this position should be winning. I'm not going to say I could win it, and just bear in mind that's sort of very, very complex things which are going on here. So we go back to this position where a3 was played, which is apparently a mistake. Now the position's drawn, pick off the H pawn. So now that pawn's going to be very dangerous. Check. And now we come to the key position. And I mean, you could have looked at the thumbnail earlier. King to G2 draws and king to F2 loses. Okay, so let's have a look at my simulator. I coded this on my simulator so I can actually look at this. Okay, great. Looks like that. We want result is a draw. And okay, good. So this is the queen b1 check's being played. Depends on, I wouldn't really check the queen b1 check. Right. So those squares, green, also the red squares, are where the position is drawn. And you can see that white should have moved to g2 towards the corner. And that might give you some sense of why, because if you remember the earlier videos on the queen and pawn versus queen, often you've got to run your king away to a far, far corner where it's not interfering with your queen's checks, and you're less likely to be hit by a counter check. Okay, so you look at this position. Why? What's the difference between f2 and g2? And that's basically the whole premise of this video. As I say, there is those other turning points in this game. You could certainly look at if you wanted to, right? So now we know that, in fact, simulator basically sort of calculates positions out, really identifies that the f2 square is pretty critical. So let's close the simulator and go through the game line where f2 was played, and that'll help us understand why. Check. Check. Okay, the game ended here. But let's continue with the checking sequence. Check, check. if the king stays up the 5th to 8th ranks, it's just going to be continually checked, right? So trying to find some cover behind the c pawn without losing the c pawn and the queen, possible counter checks. That's what we're looking at. Check. Let's just continue. Queen b6 check. King c2. Now queen takes g6 check. Queen d1. Queen d6 check. Queen d3. And we're out of checks. Now go back to this square here, this position here. That's the move you're missing. You're missing queen to f2 check, which would allow the perpetual check to continue. And when I saw that line, I thought, okay, well, that's what's going on. So let's confirm that. Let's go back to this position and play the king g2 line and do exactly the same variation. e2, check, check, check. King around to get out of the checks. King c2, over check on f2, and now basically you either go back to the b file where you'll be checked again, maybe go to the d file, and it's the same thing. The king's not getting away. That actually loses. Because you're going to queen with check. So you don't do that. You come back here, check. Always you go to the B file, we've got this check. So you can see this square is the key square. Right, so go back to the starting position. Since later on you want to check here and here, being able to access those two squares. Obviously you're checking across this way. And if your king's sitting on that square, I mean, the pawn's kind of blocking some other squares you might want to use. So that is why. Anyway, just a short video. I thought that was quite interesting in very complex positions. We're very conscious, in particularly these endgames, how your king interferes with your queen's checking possibilities. Okay, hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much for watching.